Hello everyone and welcome to this grant round information session. We will get started shortly. I know there's 1 minute to go. I hope everyone's well and safe after the earthquake this morning in Melbourne. We will get going very shortly. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in the call and then we will be away. I think you would note that this session is being recorded. Hopefully you all got that pop-up that just came up a moment ago. So I think we might kick off, and I'll start off as we always do at LaunchVic by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the many lands I should say upon which we meet, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the tens of thousands of years of entrepreneurship of our Indigenous peoples across Australia, and we certainly all have a lot to learn from that. I know I have on my journey at LaunchVic. But today we're here to talk about AgTech and specifically our Pre-Accelerator grant round. We are delighted to be partnering with Agriculture Victoria to bring you this grant round. It's a very interesting program for LaunchVic, and I'll explain why in a moment. But perhaps before we get going, I'll just a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned before, this is being recorded. If you have any questions, please put them through on the Q&A channel. I'll do my very best to moderate the Q&A channel. I'm not watching the chat. I know some of the LaunchVic team are in there monitoring the chat channel, but please put your questions through on Q&A and I'll do my very best to answer them. We will keep going today for an hour or until those questions run out. I'll give about 15-minute presentation overview of the grant round and touch on the key assessment and eligibility criteria. But as I say, please get those questions coming through on the Q&A channel. So without further ado, let's get started. So why are we focusing on AgTech specifically? Well, AgTech accounts for over 28% of Australia's food and fibre exports. It's a critical sector for the Victorian economy, and it's one of our most competitive industries. From our smaller land size, we are basically producing almost the same amount of product as New South Wales and Queensland. We're supporting, our agricultural sector is supporting over a $40 billion processed food industry and is accounting for close to $20 billion of exports. And so it's an incredibly important part of our economy. And as a result, AgTech has been identified as a priority industry of the future. What do we mean by AgTech? Well, it comes in many shapes and many sizes, but basically we mean anything to do with plant or animal science, crop protection, input management on farm systems, precision agriculture, indoor agriculture, sensors and smart farms, imagery related to agriculture, animal technologies, processing and packing where it relates to on-farm, as well as supply chain, as well as hardware. So it's a very broad sector, but all of these types of technologies are supporting our agricultural industries to innovate. And there's never been a more important time in our economy to make sure that we are innovating. So with that put aside and recognize the importance of AgTech, you would typically see a very strong startup sector that reflects the natural strengths of your economy. But it's interesting that in Victoria, that is not the case. AgTechs are accounting for less than 2% of Victoria's startups, which is a shame because our industry is so strong. And so there is a disconnect here. And that's one of the reasons why LaunchVic has partnered with Agricultural Victoria to improve both the quantity and quality of early stage AgTech startups. Agriculture Victoria wants to support the future of the agricultural sector. LaunchVic wants to support the future of the startup sector. So it's a natural partnership to see us come together to really drive both the number and quality of startups that will hopefully go on to have big impacts from LaunchVic's point of view on the economy through creating local jobs, high-tech industries, and from agricultural point of view, supporting the future of our agricultural industry to make sure that we continue to have a leading and globally recognized sector that is innovating and continually adapting to changing conditions. So what we're looking to do through the Pre-Accelerator programs is provide support for entrepreneurs in particular, rather than established startups, who are looking to launch an AgTech startup and give them the access to the best possible advice, support, and networks that are going to help them grow and scale on their journey. At LaunchVic, we've tried many programs over the last 5 years, and we know that pre-accelerators are probably the most sticky programs in terms of helping startups get created. While we recognize that hackathons and other programs can play a part in that, we tend to find that people don't tend to stick around and continue their ideas that they've generated through short form courses and hackathons and workshops into viable long-term companies. But the length of programming that comes with a pre-accelerator means that entrepreneurs are really tested over a period of time, and they're more likely to set up a startup at the end of it. So we really want to focus on pre-accelerator programs through this grant round, because we know that that's the way that we're going to increase the quantity of startups. But we want high quality pre-accelerator programs so that we're also making sure that there's a quality of startups coming through. And those quality startups will then go on to raise capital. They might go on to accelerator programs to continue to accelerate their growth. But ultimately, they are going to be businesses that are going to shape our economy into the future. So one of the other things that we are looking at doing in through this pre-accelerator program is drawing on, just as LaunchVic and Agriculture Victoria have partnered, we want to draw on the strengths of the agriculture sector and the strengths of the startup sector. So we do want to make sure that people that are putting their hat in the ring for this grant round are startup experts, but they're also agriculture experts, and that they're deeply engaged with the agriculture sector. We don't just want startup people that have had no experience of agriculture. Likewise, we don't want agriculture experts who have no experience of startups. We're really looking for teams that can bring both sides of the equation to the table and really support excellence. And in Victoria, we are blessed to have the work that Agriculture Victoria has done, including the 5 smart farms that are located across Victoria. They're in Mildura, horticulture, Tatura, also focused on horticulture, Ellenbank focusing on dairy, Horsham on grains, and Hamilton in a high rainfall zone and looking at agriculture related to that. Supporting all of this is the amazing strengths that we've got at AgriBio in Bandura, which is a centre of excellence for bioscience. And so all of these farms are connected to each other. They're leading a whole lot of big data and cutting edge innovations in the technology sector. And they're a great resource for our agriculture startups to rely on to be able to access farms. And this is critically important. A couple of years ago, LaunchVic did a study on agriculture, and we estimate that there were only a handful of startups. I've mentioned there are now 2% of our startups, around 40 AgTech startups in Victoria. But the bulk of them are based in the metro areas. And so the disconnect between the innovation that's taking place and the end users that are going to use that innovation is really apparent. And indeed, some of our agricultural startups had reported that they'd never actually been on a farm, despite the fact they were developing product for farm usage. And obviously that is not the best way to go about innovating. So we really want to make sure that our accelerator programs, pre-accelerator programs that we support are really leveraging and well connected into the agriculture sector. And we strongly encourage applicants to make a case of how they will use the assets that we've got in Victoria, including these 5 smart farms and indeed AgriBio in Bandura. It's not compulsory as part of the application, but as I say, it's a great resource for us to then be able to leverage into programs. So I encourage you to look at that. So what are the objectives of what we're trying to achieve through this? Well, we want pre-accelerator programs, and I can see that Nadun has put in a question very timely on, can we elaborate on a pre-accelerator and what are we looking for? Well, ultimately we're looking for pre-accelerator programs that are going to support aspiring and very, very early stage startups. So this is people that maybe have established a business but haven't yet got product market fit or any form of traction, no customers. That tends to be more focused on sales. And if you are really have got some product market fit and finessing that, looking for increased customer attention and attraction, that's probably an accelerator program. In a pre-accelerator program, we're really looking at programs that are going to help entrepreneurs and aspiring and maybe returning entrepreneurs to develop their entrepreneurial mindset. So that means they need support with testing ideas. They might come into a pre-accelerator with one idea that may not actually be the right idea. So how do you help foster that entrepreneurial bud that they might have, and help support them on a journey to find an idea that is going to have traction in market? And so there's a portion of this that is very early stage testing, so ideation, testing, and validating of ideas, and also understanding the markets in which they're operating. If you are designing a application or a startup that's focused on the dairy industry, you want to make sure that you really understand the dairy industry inside and out. You understand where your product fits, why it's got potential, and what the long-term opportunities are. If the opportunities are not as great as you thought, well, we want to support that entrepreneur to perhaps pivot their idea and find a new idea, rather than pursuing applications that might not have market traction. So, part of that development of entrepreneurial mindsets is also identifying product market fit and doing some early testing of products. And we certainly see that being very, very early, very preliminary. But then also helping them on their journey about what's going to come next. So pitch coaching, understanding how they're going to fund their business into the future, understanding how to access angel investors is going to be critical for many of these companies that are going to go through these programs. So while we certainly don't expect these pre-accelerator programs to be supporting investment into startups, we certainly expect them to be helping entrepreneurs to understand the journey that they're going to be going on over the next 1 to 2 years, and what they need to do to prepare themselves to be eligible for private sector capital, including through angel or even Series A venture capital. And then finally, very importantly, we want to make sure that these programs are connecting the entrepreneurs that are going through them with mentors and advisors. We know that entrepreneurs that have broad networks are going to be have a greater chance of likelihood of success than those that work in isolation, don't tap into the collective knowledge. So connecting with mentors and advisors is really important. And just to reiterate, we expect those mentors and advisors to be incredibly well versed in startups as well as agriculture. And we recognize that there might be different people with different skill sets. We're looking for the programs to bring those people together to support them. So just to summarize, what we're looking for is incredibly early stage. So it might be an entrepreneur with an idea. It might be an entrepreneur with a formation of a very early stage unproven startup. We want you to help them develop their entrepreneurial mindset. We want some ideation, testing, validation, understanding of the market, identifying product market fit, and as I said before, testing, pitch coaching, connecting with mentors and advisors. That's what we look for at LaunchVic, but we also want to hear from you. We want to know what you think entrepreneurs need at this stage, and we may well have missed something that you think is critical. And we're very keen to hear if you've got ideas of what else pre-accelerators could do to support entrepreneurs to have a greater likelihood of starting and growing a startup. We're certainly open to those ideas. So the success, what does success look like? Well, they're up on the set stage here. First of all, we want to support startup entrepreneurs by bringing their idea to life and helping them create MVPs, get going on their journey. And so that really goes to increasing the number of AgTechs in Victoria. We want to make sure that, over time, we are not just looking at 2% of our sector being focused on AgTech. We'd like to see that grow, and we'd like to see that commensurate with the size of the sector in the economy. This is not something that is going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take a long time to grow a supply of early stage AgTech startups, but this is our first foray into helping that growth trajectory with a specific focus on AgTech. And of course, and perhaps most importantly, we want quality. It's not just about getting the numbers of startups out there. We want to be supporting startups that are genuinely going to grow. They're going to be successful. They're going to make those entrepreneurs and all the people that work on that journey create wealth, create jobs. And then we want to see that reinvested back into the sector and continue to see the ecosystem grow. From an agricultural point of view, we want to see local technologies adopted into our farms to help them innovate, help them become more productive, help them adapt to all the challenges that happen in our environment, and make sure that our sector in agriculture continues to grow, continues to be globally competitive. So together, we ultimately want to see our entrepreneurs supported. We want more AgTech startups, and we want more quality coming through the pipeline. So they are the three objectives that they were looking for. For those of you that have attended our accelerator and grant round and pre-accelerator programs before, you've definitely seen this slide, and I think it's very important to touch on it again. We really want AgTech startups. I listed off what we meant by AgTech at the start. We're talking startups, not small businesses. And we do see a number of programs apply that ultimately are really helping small businesses rather than helping startups. The difference between startups and small businesses can be subtle, but ultimately the way we define a startup is a business that's using innovation to typically disrupt markets and has global potential. So it's that innovation and technology, I should say. So using technology, using innovation to disrupt markets that are global. And so they're the things that we're looking at. Small businesses are also very important to our economy. Small Business Victoria does a fabulous job of helping Victorian small businesses, but we are specifically looking at these high growth companies that have global potential. The reason LaunchVic focuses on them is their job creation potential. That's why government invests in us to do our work. We create jobs, our sector creates jobs at a faster rate than other sectors. Our businesses, our startups create jobs at a faster rate than small businesses. And it's because of that growth potential that we have unique capital needs. We rely on venture capital, small business doesn't. We rely on people that can help that very rapid growth trajectory, which can be incredibly challenging on that journey. So startups, as it's listed here, they're generally, because they're looking at a global opportunity, they're also looking at something that's often quite niche. So they're looking at something that's very narrow, but with global potential. So they get a very large market share. They're typically going to have an exit at some point. So they are going to need private sector capital, and that capital is going to come in because there's an exit opportunity down the track. And so that might be an M&A, it might be an IPO, it might be a trade sale. But alongside of that, they're almost certainly looking to be a global exporter. As I mentioned, global is really important. If you're relying on a niche sector, you're not going to achieve that in Australia. You're not going to achieve the startup status by just focusing on Australia. You need to be thinking very big from the get-go. Startups, small businesses, on the other hand, typically are geographically constrained. They don't typically tend to dominate a niche area. They might be supplying a whole range of services. They're typically not globally focused. An example that I often use, which is not related to AgTech, is accounting. So your MYOB and your Xeros are the startups of the accounting world. Your high street accountant is not a startup, it's a small business. It's offering a consulting service. It has a range of services it might offer, but it's geographically constrained. And it's also constrained by the number of consultants that it has, the number of accountants on its books. So they're the difference between the two. The reason I spend so much time on this is we really don't want small business programs. We want startup programs. And inevitably, when we run a grant round, we get grants that apply for small business support. Please don't waste your time unless you're focused on those technology-driven, innovative companies that are disrupting markets, looking at global opportunities. If you're not looking at that, there's no point putting into LaunchVic. So please don't waste your time. We want to make sure that we are very much focused on startups, not small business. So with that behind us, let's kick into what the grant summary is. What we're looking for are programs that are going to support AgTech entrepreneurs. We're not looking for biotech, we're not looking for health tech, we're not looking for fintech, it has to be agritech. And it's always amazing how many times we'll put out a grant round and we'll say it's AgTech and we'll get someone saying, but fintech's very important, why can't you support that? We won't be looking at other sectors, specifically AgTech. We're looking at pre-accelerators, not accelerators. This goes to the fact that we've very specifically identified a market need around startup creation. This is not about supporting companies to grow. We've got great accelerators such as Sproutex in the community that are fulfilling that need. We see we need to increase pipeline into those sorts of accelerators. So this is very specifically focused on pre-accelerator programs. Please don't write to us and tell us about great accelerator programs. We know we've got a problem in market with the number of startups that are being created in this area, and that's what this program is here for. We're providing funding of up to $600,000 per grant application to run programs for a minimum of 2 years. That's slightly higher than our other pre-accelerator programs that we've offered previously, and part of that recognises that there are things that we need to do to increase startup creation. So, for example, we are open to you using LaunchVic funds to provide grants to people that come into your program. Having said that, if you do want to use LaunchVic funds to provide grants for people, to encourage people to start startups, we do want to make sure that we agree when those grants are provided. It's certainly not on entry to the program. It would probably be on exit to the program, because we at LaunchVic are custodians of taxpayers' money. We want to make sure that it's put to best use. Having said that, you might want to find another source of capital that provides cash grants on entry to your program, and that is completely fine if you want to use someone else's programs. Our pre-accelerator programs, we typically recognise around 300,000 per year in operations, but you might have for an increase in costs through to the need to get particular advisors on board, whether that's startup experts or agricultural experts. But it is within that cap of 600,000. Again, it always amazes me how many people will put in an application for $1 million. We're not here to negotiate $1 million. Our cap is 600K. So please don't waste your time putting in anything that is going to ask for more funding. As I mentioned before, we do want to see both sides of the equation brought to the table. If you are a brilliant pre-accelerator program with no AgTech expertise, go find yourself some people that do have AgTech expertise. Equally, if you're an AgTech expert, but you haven't worked with startups in a great deal, go find someone who has worked with startups to strengthen your proposal. And finally, on this point, we will definitely accept applications from new and existing programs. So if you've already got an accelerator and you're looking to develop a pre-accelerator, that's great. If you're already an existing accelerator program that's looking to expand just into AgTech, that's great. If you are a brand new program, that is also great. So we'll be very happy to accept programs on all of those. I can see there's a couple of questions coming through. I'm going to read one out from Samir that looks relevant to this, saying, can incubators with high experience in incubation services partner with business improvement service providers to create a strong pre-accelerated delivery team? Absolutely, very happy to see partnerships and joint ventures come through. But as I say, you've got to make sure you've got that startup expertise and that agriculture expertise. If you don't have that, you're probably not going to meet the needs of the program. So if that business and product acceleration services is strengths in AgTech, and you have business improvement service providers focusing on startups, brilliant. So just make sure that you've got both sides of the equation. So I'm going to move on to the eligibility. I've already discussed the program focus on AgTechs. I've spoken about applicant experience a couple of times. Please make sure you've got both AgTech and startup expertise. Type of organisation, you can be already headquartered in Victoria, have an office in Victoria, be located interstate, looking to set something up in Victoria. We are ultimately funded by the Victorian government, so we do have a Victorian-centric focus on this, and the grant that we're providing must support Victorian entrepreneurs. We're not here to support on a national basis. We are funded by the Victorian government. It might be that you want to link this with a national program, that's great, but the funding that we provide must be specifically dedicated to Victorian entrepreneurs. The amount I mentioned before was 600,000. That's the maximum amount you can apply for. The application submission, Smarty Grants is our system that we use. It's online right now. It does take some time to fill out that form. Inevitably, we get someone that says, oh, I've only just started filling out the form and I haven't got time to get it in by the deadline. We don't use that as an excuse. You've got plenty of warning. You can go onto that form right now, start filling it out. You don't have to submit it until you're absolutely ready. We encourage you to use that as early as possible and get on with populating that, and give yourself as much time as possible to be able to fill that out, rather than using the last hour before deadlines are due. We're very tough on our deadlines, but again, we do allow you to go into the system at any point up to that deadline to make a submission. The key assessment criteria, I'm going the wrong way there. I've covered a lot of this, but we are looking for you to describe your program. We want to know what you're going to do, the sorts of content you're going to deliver, how many cohorts will you run, what is their length, what is the size of the cohort, who are you going to target to get into your program, And what's the cost of the program participants? It's always a question we get of, do we like seeing people being charged to apply? And it's a difficult one, but the short answer is we don't mind a small fee for participants. We recognize that a number of providers do like to get people to put a little bit of skin in the game to make sure that they are genuine about sticking the program out and really giving it their all, rather than offering free programs. LaunchVic has supported both. What we don't support is really expensive programs. We don't like to see that. We ultimately want to help these entrepreneurs on their journey. We don't want to see them having to fork out thousands of dollars to participate in one of the programs that we're offering by the Victorian government. We want to know how the program will be delivered, so where the location will be, how will you engage with the Victorian agricultural sector, and so that might include the smart farms. We also want to know what will happen if you are, for example, planning an in-person program, but COVID continues, and touch wood, 2022 will look a lot different from 2020 and 2021, but we do want to make sure that you're covered and we understand what you will do in those circumstances. And we also want to know what partners you're going to have in the program and details about that. The outcomes that we're looking for, as I said, at a macro level from the program, we're really looking at how many entrepreneurs are we supporting, how many startups are being created, and what's the quality of those startups. From the individual programs, what we want to know is how many Victorian entrepreneurs will be supported through the programs, and what will you do to support the development of the AgTech sector in Victoria as well. We recognise that each program brings a competency around events, around networking, around creating a community, and that's really, really important. It's not just the entrepreneurs that are going in through the program, it's also the other things that you can do as an organisation to help the sector grow. Experience and expertise crosses the next two slides. We definitely want to know your AgTech experience and your startup experience, which is what I mentioned before. But we also want to know the relevant team members. So who are you going to have as your key people, and how experienced are they in both startup and agriculture areas? And so we ask you to list the delivery team members and provide LinkedIn details, etc. We also are asking for 3 startup entrepreneurs that you've helped. This is basically a reference, and we want to make sure that we're really working with, going to be selecting providers that really understand how to work with companies. So we're asking for some details about what you've done to help other providers. And then we also want you to outline the collaborations of any partners that you might be bringing to the table. We certainly look upon that favourably. It's not mandated, you don't need to have partners, but we recognise that, for example, by having a corporate partner or a research partner might add to the overall programme, and that can be beneficial. Finance. I always spend a little bit of time on finance in these sessions. It's always amazing. We get wonderful grant applications, and inevitably someone just skips over the finance section and fluffs it. And you think, why have you not given us the right information to help us make a decision? And it can negatively impact you when it comes to the assessment. So to be really clear, we want to know how much you're requesting from LaunchVic, whether there are cash and in-kind contributions from your organisation, whether there are cash and in-kind contributions from a partner organisation, and they are not mandatory, but they are looked upon favourably. We also want to know if you're going to be providing any cash grants to program participants. As I've said, we're happy for you to use LaunchVic funds for that, but if you do use LaunchVic funds to provide some sort of incentive to engage in the program, it needs to be done on the back end of the program once you have provided all the services, rather than front-ended. If you want to front-end, you can go use other sources of cash for that, but just not our source of cash. So we want to understand how you will manage that. Finally, on finance, we want a budget, and we have on the form a budget that allows you to put in income and expenditure. It always should add up. So what is the income should match the expenditure. If it doesn't, there's a little thing at the bottom of the table that shows you that it's not adding up. Please don't submit it if it is not adding. It's amazing. More than 50% of applications that come through us have a budget that don't add up. Please make sure that you are submitting a budget that adds. We want to see that all the income from all the sources, LaunchVic plus partners, adds up to the predicted expenditure for the program. The final 2 points are very important to LaunchVic. We want to know your diversity and inclusion plan. It's something that is BAU for us. We expect all of our programs to make a strong effort in diversity and inclusion. And we also want to understand how you're going to recruit participants. This is often the most challenging part of a program because you can design a wonderful program, but if no one's coming to it, it's a real challenge. So we really want to get some details on your recruitment methods. Who will you go to? Are you targeting uni students? Are you targeting farmers? Are you just doing a broad call? If you are doing a broad call, how are you going to get that out to the audience that you need to attract? The number one stumbling block on most of the programs we have is their recruitment strategy. And we've now supported over 125 programs at LaunchVic. It's an area that we always scrutinize because it's always going to be the decider of success. If you've got a program and you've got 10 places and 100 people applying, that's going to be a much stronger program than a program that is really scrabbling to try and fill those 10 places. So it's very important that you give us that information. The final thing I'll say is that all the applications are assessed by panels. The details are in the guidelines on how that assessment takes place, but they're assessed against these key selection criteria. So please pay attention to them. It's worth putting the effort in to make sure you answer all of them. Don't just give us one really strong answer and imagine that that's going to get you over the line. We need strong answers on all of these criteria to make your program successful. So with that, I'm now going to throw over to any questions, and I can see that there is a number of questions coming through. I'm going to start with Sally Ann Williams. Hello, Sally, who's asked how many programs would you ideally like to fund? We're probably looking at around 2 to 3, but ultimately it depends on the quality of applications. We recognise that there is a this is not a sector where there is a huge number of entrepreneurs out there chomping at the bit to be AgTech entrepreneurs. That's slightly different from when we ran a program in health tech a couple of years ago. 20% of our sectors focused on health tech, about 400 startups. So we knew there was huge demand for programs. This is the other end of the spectrum. We're really trying to create that demand. It is a new program for us to come out at LaunchVic, not to run pre-accelerators, but pre-accelerators to try and increase quantity. But ultimately, it's going to depend on the quality. And we don't want to just put a number of programs out and have a set number that is to put a stake in the ground. We ultimately are looking for those quality programs. So it might be that we end up only supporting one if that's all the quality that's out there. But I'm very confident, looking at the people on the call today, that we will get a number of quality applications and have quite a challenging assessment process. But we certainly want to make sure that they're also distributed, and as a portfolio of programs, they fit well together. We don't want to see a whole bunch of research innovation programs that are all targeting the same universities. We would like to see a breadth of programs, perhaps some working in regions, some working around universities, some targeting farmers, some targeting university students, some targeting people who've had experience in corporates, etc. So there will be a mix. I've got a question from Nick. Is this grant for startups or content delivery companies? It's for pre-accelerator companies, Nick. So yeah, we're definitely not funding startups directly via LaunchVic. However, those pre-accelerator companies might choose to provide some grants to startups directly to encourage more startups to apply for the program. Mark has a question about, do in-kind contributions need to be specified? Absolutely. I mean, if you want to go and get in-kind contributions and not tell us, you can do that, but it works in your favor. We look very favorably on cash and in-kind contributions. And in saying that you've got cash and kind contributions, we definitely want to know the amount and see a letter of support or something like that to confirm that that amount is committed by that partner. So the dollar amount is very useful. Nadon has asked a similar question to before. Can a startup directly provide? No, we're looking for pre-accelerator programs. If you're a startup, you can't apply directly. You've got to meet the eligibility criteria. So I'm afraid this is not a program for AgTech startups. This is a program to support AgTech startups. So we're looking for pre-accelerators that are going to help startups get created and go on their journey. Can early stage innovative startups get incentives and grants such as the MVP grant? Ultimately, Mohammed, that is going to depend on the programs that get put to us. So we're certainly saying that we're going to allow programs to provide grants to AgTech startups that apply, but it's up to each individual program that applies to LaunchVic to determine what that is. So we're not setting that. It's up to the Pre-Accelerator programs to determine whether that is something that's useful or not. We've supported a range of programs in LaunchVic's life. We certainly see that incentives can work. We've done that in our own Civic Labs Accelerator program, where startups got $5,000 for going through the Pre-Accelerator program. We also see a number of programs where there is not an incentive. The incentive is that you get access to a wonderful set of programming, mentors, networks, and help and support, and that's enough of an incentive. We will leave that entirely up to the people designing the program about what's appropriate. As I said before, if you are intending to use LaunchVic's funds to provide some sort of cash grant, we want that to be back-ended on the program. We want to see that the startup actually stuck the program out and went through the program. Keep your questions coming. We've got a couple more here. Jonathan, except from funding, what other support can you provide? Will you be allowing the Agriculture Victoria's facilities such as smart farms to test and build our product and idea? So the great question, and the support is something that we're looking for the Pre-Accelerator programs to put forward. So we expect the programs to tell us what sort of support that they can put. I did outline some of the things that we like to see from Pre-Accelerators previously around ideation support, testing, validation, product market fit, pitch coaching, giving startups the idea of what their journey is going to be like in the next two years. But ultimately, it's up to those programs to determine what that is. The smart farms, as I understand, do not have support to build products, but they are a forum where you might be able to test products that are built. So we would expect the startups that come into the Pre-Accelerators to be building their products as they go along and building minimum viable products. Different accelerator programs will provide different levels of support for that MVP build. They might be able to support in-house, they might be able to recommend suppliers, they might leave it up to the startups themselves to do. That's ultimately going to depend on the programs. So I've got another question from Nick. As an AgTech startup in Victoria with experience in ag and startups, we don't get any funding. So basically, yeah, this is not a program for startups, I'm afraid. This is actually a program, and this has been very much LaunchVic's philosophy. We support providers who support startups. So there's only a limited number of companies that we support. By supporting a Pre-Accelerator program, we might be able to see another 40 or 60 startups get supported through that Pre-Accelerator program. And it's up to those programs to provide the support that is going to then help those startups on their journey. We recognize, and there's certainly a lot of data globally, that startups that go through high quality programs are often more successful than those that sort of try and go it alone. If you're an experienced entrepreneur and have been on an entrepreneurial journey before, then you're certainly more likely to succeed a second time round. You make all your learnings on the first, and there's a greater chance of success. But if you haven't been on that journey before, you do need a helping hand. And that is what this program is about. So it's not actually about helping startups, it's helping programs who will help startups. So hopefully that makes sense. Last question from Alessio. There are 100 ideas in academia that get turned into papers. That is certainly true. What happens if these ideas are matched with young entrepreneurs that want to adopt them and ultimately drive success? I think that's a perennial issue for research translation, and one that I'm deeply passionate about and can talk for a very long time about. I think, we would love to see some programs come forward that would see the unlocking of research capabilities. We recognize that we do have some strengths in our research institutions, including AgriBio, around research opportunities and ideas. If we could see those ideas be translated into commercial outcomes, that would be a fantastic outcome. So we would welcome programs that look at how you translate research as part of this program, and that's definitely relevant to a Pre-Accelerator program. So thank you, Alessio, for asking that question. David from Runway has asked if there's a preference for initiatives that cover the whole state or focus on a particular region. or whether there's a preference or both options are possible. But to be honest with you, both options are possible. It ultimately depends on the program. If you are offering a whole of state program, you might choose to do that entirely online. We would want to make sure that we're seeing really high quality online programs. If you are able to have the resources to send people out physically, that's fantastic. Equally, you might turn around and say, you know, runways focused in Geelong. For those that don't know, you might choose to just focus on the southwest region of Victoria, for instance, or Geelong. Ultimately, we don't mind, and we've certainly supported pre-accelerator programs that have specific geographic focus, like Startup Shake Up in Northeast Vic, Startup Gippsland in the east, and indeed Runway and Warrnambool have partnered to support Southwest Victoria before. Ultimately, what we're looking at is quality. So we don't want to see a statewide program run at the expense of quality. Equally, if you are providing a very localized program that's extremely high quality, that could be equally as attractive. So basically, everything's on the table. But what we want to do is make sure that the quality of programming is there so that the startups that are ultimately going to go through these programs are going to get as much support as they possibly can. We have got a question about whether the grant is applicable for converting agrirace biomass to value-added products. Again, this is not a grant round for startups. This is a grant round for programs that support startups. It may well be that those grant rounds, well, we would absolutely expect that the pre-accelerator programs that we support would and should be very interested in receiving applications from the sorts of startup that you are proposing here. But just to reiterate, this is not a program that startups can directly apply to. We're looking for pre-accelerator programs that are going to help startups on their journey. Please do keep the questions coming. We've got another one from Samir. Will LaunchVic assist in creating partnerships with agriculture companies which will enable pre-accelerators to facilitate testing and product MVP validation? Not really, no. We want the pre-accelerators to do the hard work here, I'm afraid. So part of the reason we're supporting these programs is so that they get the operational support to go out and develop those programs themselves. So LaunchVic will not be supporting the successful applicants to find partnerships. However, we can certainly facilitate where we can. So, you know, we would certainly expect to facilitate introductions to Agricultural Victoria. We certainly can imagine that we could facilitate access to the smart farms, although I note that you might want to reach out to the smart farms prior to putting in your application. But if you don't, we can facilitate those introductions once we've selected the participant. But we are not here to do the lifting. It's the pre-accelerator programs that are the people that have to do the heavy lifting to make sure that they are putting in place all the structures to help those startups grow. And that might include facilitating product testing, MVP validation, manufacturing strategy. All those sorts of things would be the sorts of things we imagine the pre-accelerators will be responsible for. That is the last question that's on the chat, on the Q&A channel at the moment. If anyone else has got anything else, please do send them through. I'll stay online for a few more minutes. I'm very happy to take more questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up, but thank you for your time today, for attending. We very much look forward to receiving your applications. We recognise that this particular grant round is going to make a massive difference, we hope, to the sector, both from a production point of view for our agricultural industries, but also from our startup sector point of view. We want more startup creation. So we really thank you for applying and taking the time to attend today. We very much look forward to seeing your applications. And please send questions through if there are any more. I'm more than happy to answer them. But otherwise, we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes. So thank you. Mohammed's just asked a question about where we can see exciting pre-accelerator programs in AgTech. Well, hopefully you'll be seeing them in Victoria very soon, but we certainly encourage you to do research. There are some great programs around the world. I note that Israel has got a very strong AgTech sector. There's a lot going on in California. There's a lot going on in Europe. So I'd encourage you to reach out and do some research. But in Victoria, there are not currently a huge number of pre-accelerator programs, if any, that are focused, dedicated on AgTech. We recognize the great work of accelerators like Rocket Seeder and SproutX, but we definitely are looking forward to seeing more of this sort of activity. So thank you for that question. Someone's asked, Mark has asked if it's in the chat if it's possible to provide this presentation online. Was probably we can share it around, but to be honest with you, I'd look at the application guidelines. There's nothing that I've said today that isn't explicitly in the application guidelines. So really and strongly encourage you to look at that. That's available on our website, and I believe that is posted in the chat channel. If it's not, I might ask one of the team to quickly pop that web link into the chat channel so that everyone has got that. Yeah, that is the best document to look at, is the guidelines. And thank you all for your sessions coming through, for the thanks coming through. Really appreciate it.